Welcome to the Black Entrepreneur Experience podcast, inside the business, buzz, and brilliance of Black entrepreneurs. Here is your host, Dr. Frances Richards.
What happens in Vegas goes all over the world on Black Entrepreneur Experience episode number 496. Thank you for joining us as we elevate the Black Entrepreneur Experience by interviewing CEOs, thought leaders, innovative thinkers, and Black entrepreneurs across the globe. I'm your host, Dr. Frances Richards. Imagine being born blind and you are on a mission to empower blind and visually impaired clients to reclaim their independence through innovative training methods. As founder and CEO of IC Technologies, welcome Kamille Richardson.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. I've given our audience such a brief bio. Why don't you fill in the gaps and share with our audience what you'd like them to know about you and your company?
Sure, absolutely. My name is Kamille Richardson. I am the founder and CEO of IC Technologies. I also happen to be born blind. We are a people development consulting firm. We work with corporate agencies and government agencies, and we work with their teams to empower them to work more collaboratively and also to be more inclusive. I do a lot of training and speaking on topics surrounding inclusion. We also discuss topics around workforce wellness. And I also do a motivational speech, my keynote speech, and it's called The Magic of Being Differently Disabled. In that talk, I share my story and also the stories of others. I also give my audience action steps on how they too can be inclusion warriors, not just in their community, but also in their workplace. That's a little bit about me.
And when you talk about your signature speech, tell us what is a few points that you want the audience to take away. I know you're not giving us the speech, but what's the high level piece of your speech?
The high level point is when I'm doing the speech, I talk about 3 blind spots that a lot of businesses, not all of them, but most businesses have that keep them from being as inclusive as they like. And a lot of times, one of them is that they don't realize that there's value in the disabled workforce. A lot of times they look at us from a lens of incapability, or they look at us from a lens of charity. They don't see us as being productive members of our community, our community leaders. So I talk about that. And one of the other things I do is I give them 3 ways, like I said, 3 action steps that they can take in their business and also in the community to be that inclusion warrior. One of the things that I encourage people to do is to be a learner. So when I say that, I'm spilling a lot of my tea as well, because as somebody who's born blind, I only focused on what was going on in the blind community, right? I just discussed our needs and things that we needed to be more accessible. But the more I started doing work in this advocacy field, I started realizing, of course, and I had to learn more about the other different types of disabilities. What are their needs? And also I realized that there are things that I take for granted as well. Although I may not be able to see, I can still walk up steps if there is no elevator, but someone in a wheelchair cannot. So I encourage people to be a learner and learn all about the different types of disabilities so that when you're discussing inclusion hiring in your next meeting, you can share what you know, and you can also be well versed in that yourself so that you can also not just provide an opportunity, but create an equitable space for people who have any kind of disability to be able to get the job done in the best way that they can.
Talk to us, Kamille, about that aha moment when you knew this was going to be the work that you were going to do.
The aha moment came when I realized that I can share, a lot of the work that I do is based on my lived experiences. When I have issues with accessibility and whatnot, I said, you know what? I can come in and make a difference. For me, I think also the aha moment came when I was in my early career search. It was colored a lot of times by rejection. And that rejection stemmed from bias, both conscious and unconscious. And all of us have it, yes. But I would show up, right? And I'd be ready to rock out an interview because I'd get an offer to come in to interview for a position that I applied for. And I would show up, they would see me, and then they would see that white kid in my hand. And all of a sudden that temperature would drop about 20 degrees, I'd say. So what I mean by that is the warm greetings that I received when I first got the invitation to come in for the interview. Well, that would all of a sudden turn into those cold, awkward conversations. And it would always end with that whole "don't call us, we'll call you" thing. But the only thing is those calls and those emails, well, they never came, or I would get the email that said, "we decided to go with a different candidate." And after going through all of that long, exhausting job hunt process, I decided that I had enough. And I also decided that instead of sitting around talking about the problem that existed, I would help to become the solution. I would help to create the solution. So that's how I see technologies came to be. And it also, you mentioned earlier about how I was teaching the blind and visually impaired how to become more independent and thrive. I started doing that through teaching them how to use their iPhones and their iPads and the screen reading software on the computer so that they could become more independent. I was working with people who had recently lost their sight, or they lost their sight later on in life. Some people who were born blind, but a lot of them had recently lost their sight. So they're learning how to reconnect with the world and gain their independence. The assistive technology I was teaching them how to use was allowing them to be able to do that. But with that came gainful employment, and that was difficult to come by. So the technologies portion was me teaching them how to do that. And we evolved into inclusion training and me giving this keynote through the same issues that I was going through. My clients were going through the same thing. My blind clients were going through the same thing. So I said, why don't I come in and teach and be the solution, teach people how to address these biases in a safe space where there's no judgment, and someone with the lived experience is coming in, and my team, we're coming in to work with people to teach them how to be more inclusive in the workplace and also be more inclusive in the community.
Let's take us on that journey being a little girl and being born blind. Talk about that story.
I had a very lovely childhood, to be honest with you. I grew up in a very, very, very supportive, loving family. And I have to give a shout out to my mom, God rest her soul, because she passed away in 2021 on the 4th of July. But my mom was the leader in that. She was the rock. She was the one who gave me my foundation. Now, I was born in 1980, whatever it was. I'm not going to say the year. But, back then, of course, there was no Google. There was no access to online forums for parents of blind children. But even with that lack of information, my mom was determined to give her blind daughter the tools that she needed to succeed in the world. So that meant that she did not limit me. She let me go outside and play and get dirty right along with my siblings. And she let me explore my world around me. And she guided me, yes, but she let me lead the way and show her how I needed to learn. And then there was my sister, who's also my co-founder of IC Technologies. She and I are extremely close. And she was also an inclusion warrior from the beginning. She made sure that I was included in everything we did. Like, she would adapt how she played so that I could play the same games. She would read books out loud to me or record them so that I could listen to them later. So she was the Audible back in the day before Audible existed. Or she would describe things that were happening on TV if we were watching a movie. So I would know and I could follow along just like everybody else. So my childhood was shaped by both of them, just making sure that my mom made sure I had the access to things that I needed. She was my advocate. She was my voice until I learned how to use mine. And she taught me how to do that as well. And my sister made sure that I was included. And that just made for a really great childhood. And my family followed suit. The rest of my family, everybody else followed suit. Nobody sheltered me. Nobody treated me like I was made of glass. As a matter of fact, can't was not in anybody's vocabulary. If I told them that I wanted to fly a plane, they would say, "Oh, girl, let's go to the airport tomorrow. We can meet a pilot." And I'd be like, "Wait a minute now. Y'all know I'm blind, right?" Like, I was just kidding. But that's just how much confidence that they had in me by way of giving me the confidence that I have now in myself.
Let's talk about the language when you talk about being inclusive and the difference of saying being born blind versus visually impaired versus being blind after birth, later in life. Why is all of that important? And explain that to our audience.
Language is really subjective because I use the word blind because I am a bold, blind woman. That's who I am. I was born totally blind. So, really, there's a lot of talks around the language that we use, but it really is individual. Some people prefer to use the term visually impaired. They might have some usable vision, or that might refer to somebody who has some usable vision. And so they coin themselves as visually impaired. But for me, I'm unapologetically blind because that's just who I am. And I know a lot of people, people often, they don't know how to address me or ask about blindness. So they'll say, were you born seeing impaired or differently sighted? I mean, there's just so many euphemisms that people use, but really do not be afraid to call a thing and say what it is. For me, I do not hesitate to say that I am blind. Now, you may get someone else who prefers to use the term visually impaired. I don't judge anybody for their language choices. But for me, Kamille Richardson, I am blind. I was born blind and I am blind. And if someone who goes blind later on in life, that is a process as well. That's a grieving process. They're grieving the loss of their sight. So for them, it might be tough to use the word blind because they're having to get used to being blind. So at that time, they don't know how to use it. But the more they begin to accept their blindness, the more the term gets easier for them to use.
Let's talk about starting your business. What is something you wish you knew before starting IC Technology?
I wish I knew that you don't have to know all the things about everything. I was one of those people who was just like, I don't want to get started until I know all there is to know and I can do everything there is to do. And that put a whole lot of undue pressure on me. And it took me a little longer to actually jump full out and take that leap into the world of entrepreneurship. For a little while, I just kind of dip my toe into the pool and not jump all the way in. But I wish I knew. But I do know this now that you don't have to know everything. There are people out here who can help you who know the things that you don't. That's what I wish I had known earlier, but I know it now and I'm implementing it now.
There are so many brands and businesses, Kamille, that are dominating. Talk about a brand or business that's dominating that you admire and why.
Oh, I love this question. Apple. Apple all the way for me. And the reason I say that is because that's actually what sort of gave me my start. I started using the iPhone probably around, I think it was the iPhone 3 or 4. Anyway, the very early iPhone days. And I will say for me, they are one of the most intuitive companies when it comes to accessibility. And I'll give you a fun fact real quick, Francis. So every Apple product has an accessibility section. Now, if you don't need it, you have no idea that it's there. But for those of us who do, it has been a game changer for us. I use a screen reader called VoiceOver, which is the built-in screen reader in all Apple products. And it has changed my life. Because of that, I was able to log on this morning to do this interview. I'm able to scroll on social media, post on social media. I'm able to slide into my own DMs. I'm able to order food for myself on DoorDash or Uber Eats or anything that I choose to use. I can get my own groceries. When the pandemic hit and we couldn't go into grocery stores and I didn't feel safe going in, well, because of apps like Instacart and the ability to use VoiceOver to navigate, I could get my own groceries during the pandemic. And I still do that now because I'm not a shopper in the grocery store. But Apple has really changed the game for us as far as accessibility is concerned. And that is a product that I will always champion because it's what I use and it's what I know. And it has given me life.
Thank you for that. I want you to have a monologue. I want you to name this person, living or not, and they've inspired you so much. Who is that person and what are you saying, Kamille, to that person?
That person would be my mother. I talked about her a little bit earlier, but she really was my champion from the time I was born till the time she left this world in 2021. She taught me how to be independent. She taught me even little things, from something as small as learning how to drink out of a straw, because people can see how to do that, but I couldn't. She taught me how to do things like that. When I grew up in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And at that time, there were no preschools that could accommodate me or my needs. So my mother created a preschool for not just me, but for all blind children in Fayetteville, North Carolina, so that we would all have access to an equitable early education, which is so integral and very important for anyone, but especially children with disabilities. And like I said, she was always that one who was out there at the school speaking up for me, making sure the teachers knew who I was and what I needed until I learned how to do that myself. She encouraged me to step outside of my comfort zone and try new things like running track in high school, joining the track team for a year. I didn't want to do it, but she encouraged me to do it. And I'm so grateful that I did because it showed me that I could do hard things. So I really just have to give a shout out to my mother. And I know she's looking down on me and really just enjoying the success that I'm having now and just cheering me on from up there now.
And say your mother's name.
Her name is Jacqueline Bowens, but everybody called her Jackie.
And our sincere condolences for the passing of your mother.
Thank you.
Who is your ideal client?
My ideal client are those companies who are ready to make inclusion not just a nice thing to do, but a part of their company fabric and their company bottom line. A lot of times when I'm speaking, part of the advice that I give or the action steps that I give is honor that equal opportunity statement that's at the bottom of your website. My ideal client would be those clients who are ready to honor that equal opportunity statement wholeheartedly. And that's a statement that says that that you don't discriminate based on age, race, religion, disability. I would love to work with those clients who are ready to be a business of their word and really put that equal opportunity statement into action.
And we've seen kind of shifts and pivots in the inclusion space. Tell me your take. Where do you see the inclusion space with corporations? Do you see it expanding, decreasing? What do you see?
From what I've seen lately, people really are ready to be more inclusive in that space, especially for people with disabilities, because of course we're out here making our voices heard. So I think that people really are genuinely curious to know how they can make their spaces more inclusive and how they can make their brands more accessible for people with disabilities. Because as clients, as consumers of products and services, we want to see ourselves in your brand. So I think that companies are ready for us to see us in their brands.
Advice you wish you had followed?
Maybe again, I wish I'd followed this a little earlier. Use your resources. And because again, and I know this is not just me, but a lot of times we focus on what we don't have and we don't feel like we can move forward because we don't know or we don't have the proper tools. But I just know that people did tell me, use your resources. And sometimes you feel like you don't have them, but you never know until you actually start reaching out to people and letting them know what it is you need. And that's when the resources will show up. So again, that's advice that I wish I followed earlier than I started, because now I do follow that advice.
What problem exists in the world today, Kamille, that you would like to solve?
I think a major problem that exists today is people's perception of those of us with disabilities. A lot of times, like I said, they see us as people who are not capable of living full lives and lives where we are showing up as people who are thriving. And so the work that I do and the way that I show up is as someone who is a leader, someone who is a mindset shifter. Because again, when I'm on stage and I'm giving my keynote, I'm using my voice, I'm using my story, I'm using my words to shift people's mindsets. That might seem like a heavy lift, but for me, it's not, because it's a mission and I believe in it. And I believe that with everybody who hears me, everyone who sees me, who follows me on social media, you're going to get an education and you're going to have your mindset shifted. I believe that the more I'm out here speaking, the more I show up, the more people's mindsets are going to be shifted.
Who are your top two influencers, mentors? Some people call them influencers, some call them mentors. And what lesson did they teach you, Kamille?
I believe for me, my main mentor was my mother. And the lesson that she taught me was do not be afraid to use your voice and also try something new. Like I said, from a very early age, she had me speaking up for myself and not hesitating to speak up for when something's wrong. So I believe that she was my main mentor. And in a moment of transparency, I am actually striving to be that mentor that I wish I had seen outside of my mother. In saying that, I mean that I really did not see, I mean, I saw Black women all the time who were very successful and who were really doing their thing, but I did not see very many blind women who were Black who were really doing their things. And I'm not saying they don't exist because I've met plenty of them now on my journey, but starting out in this space, I really did not see it. I am now reaching back to speak to other young blind women who are on an entrepreneurship journey themselves and being that mentor that I wanted to see.
And speak specifically to them right now. What would you say?
I would tell them to keep moving forward. Don't hold yourself back because I did that. I stood in my own way sometimes because I felt like, who in the world would want to hear what I have to say? But once I moved out of my own way and I really just started moving forward, the teachers were showing up, the resources I needed were showing up. So I just say, keep pressing forward, keep moving your feet. And I know the road sometimes can feel a little bumpy. It can feel like there's some unknown things ahead of you. But as long as you keep going forward, the way is going to be cleared.
What is your zone of genius?
My zone of genius is being that orator. I feel like I'm a very wonderful speaker. I'm a great communicator, and I'm also a wonderful educator. I am someone who loves to teach people. I think it's because I keep a lot of knowledge in my head as well. So I love teaching people what I know, but I know that is my gift. Back when I was doing assistive technology training, I was so excited when people understood the concept. I would celebrate right along with them. And I just love to see people flourish. So that also helped my gift of educating flourish. And I love speaking life into people. Again, as I was doing that training, I was speaking life into people. I was telling them, they would come in and they would be hesitant and they would be afraid. And I would just pour into them and let them know, you got this, you can do this, we're going to do this together. And that's what I do now. I'm oftentimes, like I said, when I'm speaking, I'm not fussing at people. I'm encouraging people to be an inclusion warrior. I'm educating them from the stage on how you can be that inclusion warrior. And that is allowing me to use my gift as an orator and operate in my zone of genius.
Let's take a snapshot of the last 30 days. What was your biggest win?
Being able to speak at Disney was my biggest win. I loved being able to do that. And I actually got to go out and speak on their stage. That was a huge win for me. It's one of the biggest stages I've spoken on thus far. And I really enjoyed my time out there and being able to share with that audience what I'm sharing with you now.
Congratulations. How did you celebrate the win?
We celebrated by having a fun night out on the town in LA.
Nice. What's on the horizon for IC Technology in the next 6 months?
Well, in the next 6 months, like I said, we have a couple of other, I can't say it right now, but we're working on a couple of other corporations. We're in the works of getting things together to work with them. But like I said, I can't say that who they are at the current moment, but we are in the works of doing that. And I am currently working on expanding my social media presence because, again, my aim is always to educate and empower people. So I am growing that steadily, and I'm super excited about that. So who knows how big it'll be in 6 months. So that is pretty much what's going on right now with IC Technologies. Like I said, we have a couple of things in the works that we're working on with different corporations. And trust me, when it happens, we will let y'all know. And like I said, growing my social media platforms. That's what's happening at the moment.
And thank you for sharing that. Let's talk about raising capital. How did you raise capital to start IC Technologies?
Well, fortunately, there was not a lot of overhead. I worked a lot remotely. A lot of the work that we do is remote, or we do travel to some of the destinations or to some of the locations. We're able to do that, but it's very low overhead. Our team that we have are contractors. So They come in, a lot of our instructors and trainers, they work with us through contracting. So that's not a lot of overhead that we have to work with as far as having like W-2 employees and whatnot. So it didn't take a whole lot.
If you lost everything and you had to rebuild in 30 days, what industry and why?
I would probably lean towards the fashion industry if I needed to rebuild really quickly, I think, because again, the misperception for a lot of us is that we don't really care about how we look. And that is not true. People who are blind don't care about how they look. They don't like to shop or anything like that. And I definitely have to bust that myth because I am one who absolutely is a fashionista. I love to look fabulous. So I think I would try to lean into that aspect and what I like to do and try to build some brand partnerships in the fashion industry.
Let's talk about legacy. When it's all said and done, how do you want to be remembered?
I would love to be remembered as someone who worked tirelessly to make sure that the voices in the blind community were heard, and that as someone who represented us very well and unapologetically.
What is the best decision you have made as a leader?
Bringing my sister on as my co-founder was the best decision that I could have made as a leader. My sister Lakila she worked in corporate America for 15 years and she retired from corporate America. So she has that corporate know-how, you know. She is good at the operations portion of our business. Making the decision to have her as my co-founder and us building this business together was the best decision I could have made.
That's awesome. Is there a social cause tied to your business?
Always. I mean, like I said, I am always, always, always showing up as one of the voices for the blind community, not just the voice, but one of them, because there are so many of us out here doing this work. There's always the social aspect for me when I do that kind of work as well. Like I said, I don't just talk about how to be inclusive in the workplace, but I talk about how to create a more inclusive community. I encourage people to get involved with organizations that either serve people with disabilities or that are run by people with disabilities and serve alongside them. And I also encourage people because I know that there are ones out here who know someone with a disability and really get to know them and be genuinely curious about how you can offer them a hand up and not simply just giving them a handout.
And what is something we, as part of the community, that we don't know about maybe the blind community or the disabled community that we should know?
A lot of times people see us as inspiration, but that is oftentimes not how we want to be seen. We're really not doing anything any more remarkable than you are. We just do things in a different way. I always used to joke around and I would say, listen, the electric company does not care whether I can see that light or not. If I don't pay that bill, they're going to turn those lights off. So I got to get out here and work to pay these bills. So we really don't live a more remarkable life than you do. We're just living our life.
I like that. We know in business, there's a lot of rewards and risks. What is your most costly lesson that you've learned in life or business?
If I don't act now, or, the time was now for me to act. I feel like in a way, like I said, it took me a minute to really take a leap of faith and start full time in entrepreneurship. And it cost me a lot of time, I feel. And that's something that we cannot get back. But I'm making up for that time that it cost me by really being intentional about the work that I do and really going hard for what I believe in. So I feel like for me, like I said, because of my hesitation cost me a lot of valuable time.
And what's working well now in your business?
The one thing that is now working well, I think, is, and this might sound like it might sound like an off the beaten path answer, but I think for me, what's really working well is being intentional about my self-care. Like I said, when I first started out, I was so busy trying to figure everything out myself and worrying and fretting about how I was going to make this business work. But once I stopped and really realized, and once everything started going and I started realizing, girl, you got to start taking care of yourself. That's how this business is going to thrive. And I really started focusing on how can I be a healthier, better Kamille, both physically and mentally? Again, that's when the resources started showing up because I was taking care of me. That meant I was better capable of taking care of my business. So that has worked really well for me now about being really intentional about my self-care.
And what does self-care look like for Kamille?
It looks like taking time to hang out with my family, going to my happy place, which is the beach, or just taking out the time to binge that show that I've been putting off watching for so long because I haven't had the time.
Talk to a younger Kamille. What advice would you give to a younger you?
I would say, girl, you got this. You have got this. Don't be hesitant, be anxious for nothing, and just really lean into who you are, girl, because you are magnificent. You are a phenomenal woman, girl. And I can't wait for you to see the you that is here now.
You talked about Apple. Is there a technology tool or a technology platform that you would recommend? And we're talking specifically to the blind community or the disabled community that they should know about, that they don't know about, that you're using.
My iPhone has really been my lifeline to everything. Like I mentioned earlier, it's how I get things done. I do a lot of the work that I do from my phone. So it really is, it's your tool of mobility because again, you can get where you need to go. It is your way of communicating. It's your way of really being able to live life because it's not just us in the disabled community. Everybody pretty much lives their life from their phone. So I think it is a very important tool to have in your toolbox.
Absolutely. How do you include your personal life, your family life with your business life?
That's really easy. Like I said, I work with my sister. She is my partner. She's my business partner. But I also take a lot of time I work from home, so I can work from anywhere, really. I'm always back and forth between Raleigh, North Carolina, where I live, and Atlanta, where my sister lives. So I take a lot of time there and I make sure that I can devote as much time as I can to family and friends because, again, we have to incorporate that work-life balance. And I think I do it really, really well. So that's really how I incorporate work-life and balance life. A lot of times the work that I do is here in Atlanta. So after I finish the work here, I can go hang out with my family and friends. And the same when I'm in Raleigh, in my hometown. I have business that I handle, and then I get a chance to go hang out with my family and friends. So being an entrepreneur really has afforded me the time to be able to balance those two worlds.
And speaking of North Carolina, and they've had Helena came through.
Mm-hmm.
How is your family managing? Is everyone okay?
Oh, yes, my family is fine. I actually live in central North Carolina. So where Helene hit is about 4 hours away from me in the mountains of North Carolina.
Okay.
So we weren't affected.
That's a blessing. Thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about having fun in business. Are you still having fun in your?
Yes, I am. I am absolutely having fun. Like I said, I people don't like to do a lot of public speaking, but I'm the person where you give me a mic and you put me up on stage and I'm going to have a good time. Because again, I'm talking about what I know. I'm talking about my life and I'm giving you tips. So I always have a good time doing that because I'm really bubbly. So my personality is a lot of fun. I encourage a lot of audience engagement, even when I am doing the training, when I'm doing corporate training is what I'm saying. I love to incorporate audience engagement, even if it's over Zoom. I'm like, hey, y'all, come off mute. Let me know something. And especially because I can't see. So audience participation for me is very important because I can't see smiles or nods or even looks of confusion. So I tell people, hey, give me a round of applause if you ever felt this way, or give me a round of applause if you know about that. So I have a really good time whenever I am working. So it really doesn't feel like work.
That's awesome. What inspires you to keep going, Kamille?
Well, it all goes back again to shifting people's mindset. The fact that there's always an opportunity to educate, there's always a moment to empower someone. That's what inspires me to keep going because really, whether I'm working or not, I'm always educating because a lot of times I'm the first blind person that somebody has ever met. So I'm always teaching them how to walk with me through sighted guide or allowing me to follow behind them using my cane. So that is what inspires me is the fact that I am out here shifting people's mindsets about people with disability because they met me. That's my inspiration to keep going.
When you talk about mindset, that is so critical in life, in business, and to excel, thrive, and propel. Talk about that moment when it was a very clear mind shift for you, and what was that moment like?
It is very important. But I think for me, the moment when my mindset really shifted was when I realized that I have the opportunity to really make a difference in someone's business or in a community by sharing my stories. And that really felt empowering to me because, again, I knew that I was going to be able to make a difference. Sometimes, a lot of times it can get frustrating whenever someone is talking to the person I'm with instead of talking to me, or talking around me, or not knowing they don't know how to interact with me, so they just choose not to. The moment it became really clear that I have the opportunity and I get to go out here and change people's lives, it lightened the load for me. I felt buoyant and I felt like, ooh, I have the power to control this narrative.
Kamille, if you conducted this interview, what is the one question you would have asked yourself? I would like you to ask the question and answer it.
I would ask myself, what is your favorite color and why did you choose it? My answer to that question would be, my favorite color is purple. And people will ask me all the time, do I have a concept of color? And the answer is, I've never seen color, but I see it in a very abstract way. And I chose purple as my favorite color when I was a really little girl because I loved the way it sounded. And purple made me think of fun. Purple's a fabulous color and it's a color of royalty. But I just loved it when I was little because nothing rhymed with it. So my reasoning for the reason I chose purple expanded with my age.
Thank you for that. We've come to the part of our interview. It's called Rapid Round of Fun. I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and I'd like you to give me very quick answers. If there's something you desire not to answer, feel free to say pass. Are you ready for the Rapid Round of Fun?
I'm ready.
Your first job.
I was on the radio.
You relax doing what?
Netflix and chill.
Your favorite singer or rapper?
Beyonce.
Your favorite dance song?
I don't have one.
Your favorite comfort food?
French fries.
What food you eat every week, no matter what?
French fries again.
Your favorite month?
June.
Work out or hit the couch?
Hit the couch.
Kamille Richardson, thank you so much for joining us on Black Entrepreneur Experience Podcast. Before we let you go, share with our audience the best way for them to connect with you and to do business with you. Feel free to leave all your social media handles.
Sure. You can reach me on Instagram at Kamille Aaliyah, which is Kamille Aalia. You can also find me on LinkedIn at Dr. Kamille Richardson. And for those of you who might still be using Facebook, you can find me on Facebook at Kamille Richardson. And TikTok, my bad, I got a TikTok now. The Kamille Richardson on TikTok.
Thank you, Kamille. That's a wrap.
Thank you for listening and subscribing to Black Entrepreneur Experience. We would love for you to leave a review and rating on iTunes and share with your friends. For show notes and more episodes, go to www.beepodcast.com. Join us next Wednesday, and remember, green is the new black. So keep your bank accounts and your business in the black.